Hey, what's going on, everyone? I thought I'd bring back some individual book review videos to the channel. Figured why not start with something at least a little kind of fun. And we have El Cid, The Life and Afterlife of a Medieval Mercenary by Nora Berend. I want to thank Pegasus Books for sending me a copy of this title that just recently came out. And as it says on the tin here, this is all about the life of El Cid, also known as Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar. But you'll learn what El Cid actually means, maybe means, kind of, potentially might have meant during the time period. I don't want to give that away, but that's definitely in here as well. And this is big emphasis on the afterlife portion. There's a bit, like I said, there's a bit of a biography. The first couple of chapters dealing with the historical El Cid. But the problem is, this is what, 11th century CE medieval Spain. There's not tons and tons of source material, and obviously we have the big, the Legend of El Cid, the poem of El Cid, as like kind of the main text that we're kind of working off a little bit there, which is, essentially an epic poem about the deeds of Rodrigo Diaz. So like I said, big emphasis on the afterlife. Now I thought that was pretty interesting, but let's just start with the historical stuff. Like I said, I think the first two or three big chapters are dealing with medieval Spain under King Alfonso, who was kind of the reigning hegemon of the Iberian Peninsula, as well as Rodrigo Diaz and kind of what it was like to be essentially a medieval warlord during the times. Things were pretty hectic, pretty chaotic. You always have this kind of envisioning of the code of chivalry in the high and late Middle Ages and everything like that. But medieval Spain is a little bit more on the periphery, I guess you could say. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, Rodrigo Diaz wasn't really the perfect vassal. So actually, why don't we just get into that right now? He felt slighted, a little bit snubbed and stuff. Might have had some trumped up charges thrown against him by the king, his courtiers, and all that. And so he kind of goes into exile, fights with the Moors, the Muslims of Spain, and everything. Eventually, kind of conquers Valencia in Castile. Probably tries to become as like kind of little own petty fiefdom, kingdom sort of thing, kind of going on, and then eventually kind of reconciles a little bit. With Alfonso and whatnot. So you kind of have a lot going on. It's not always like super black and white. And one of my big takeaways from this is El Cid, Rodrigo Diaz. He fought against Muslims, he fought with Muslims, and he fought against Christians and with Christians. So he reminds me almost kind of as a kind of a mercenary warlord. He reminds me a lot of Pyrrhus of Epirus from like ancient Greece. He's a very opportunistic person. He just took opportunities when they came, and then kind of, did the damage control a little bit later and try to build maybe he kind of tried to build up his little mythos around him, maybe as he was living. Unfortunately, the poem of El Cid comes down, I think, about a century after his lifetime. So, you kind of have to go into a lot of the historiography and the textual analysis and all that kind of stuff. But what we do know for certain is in here, and then there's a lot of, bets that are hedged and everything during his lifetime. What we can know for sure, then, a lot of stuff that we can probably kind of guess and glean towards. But like I said, the remaining 2/3-ish, at least, I'd say at least 2/3 of the book or so, are dealing with the afterlife of El Cid. And I found this stuff really, really fascinating. For example, we get into monasteries, that pretty much any monastery or location that was even like tangentially related to Cid or his wife, or maybe their kids stayed there at a monastery or something for like during a little bit of time while he was away. They all try to build up this like really big reputation being attributed, in relation to El Cid and whatnot. One big thing in medieval history is, for example, especially with monasteries, is religious icons and holy relics and that kind of thing. And it was really interesting to look at a bunch of different relics that are still around that are attributed to El Cid, and basically, kind of going through each one, going, this is the provenance of it. This is what we know for sure about, his sword, for example, or these treasure boxes that he had and things, kind of going through the history of it and what we do know for certain. And in a lot of cases, how there's just no way they're actually like El Cid's from, the 11th century. So I found that stuff really fun. And while we're talking about that, there is a few plates in the text, and a couple of these things are shown in there. So I thought that was pretty good. Like, for example, that's like, one of his, alleged golden chest, or chest full of gold and that kind of thing. And there's his sword, Letizona, or, what's hailed to be his sword, like, currently. So you get a pretty decent amount of plates for a book this size. I will say, I got really interested towards the end of the book when we're talking a lot about how the mythos, the legend of El Cid, how it's been used and abused in the modern age. And essentially, going down through the centuries, everyone kind of wanted to appropriate the name of, El Cid to their cause to kind of grant it some legitimacy. And most notably, this takes place during Francisco Franco's fascist regime in Spain, from the Spanish Civil War in the 30s down through, I think it was the mid-70s, if I remember correctly. So I just wanted to read a couple of different passages. But essentially, El Cid, like I said, El Cid's name, it gets, misappropriated by everyone and their brother, basically, on both the right and the left, to kind of utilize him towards their cause, to kind of, give it some hitting power and stuff. Anyways, let me read a couple little passages here. So this is talking about Francisco Franco's regime during the Spanish, a little bit after the Spanish Civil War, utilizing the Cid. So this identification was coupled to the more specifically Iberian precedent, the reconquest of the peninsula from the Moors, which in its nationalist recasting was turned into a liberation akin to Franco's endeavors to liberate Spain from the Bolsheviks. The Francoist idea of the Reconquista did not merely distort the process through which power relations in the peninsula changed, it turned the alleged reconquest into a common past for Spaniards through which they constructed their identity, the very essence of the Spanish nation. The indiscriminate use of terror, coupled with the lofty rhetoric of crusade and reconquista, made the Cid particularly relevant as a heroic precursor of Franco. The Cid was thus appropriated by a murderous regime used to justify both mass killing and foisting a Christian nationalist Castilian identity on Spain. The parallel through military activity is not difficult to find, but Franco, of course, did not go back to medieval sources. He drew on the mythic Cid, and it was the work of Ramon Menendez Pidal that provided the heroic image of the Cid for Francoist Spain. And we kind of go on a little bit there. That historian Pidal is also mentioned. He was kind of like a ethnographer and that sort of thing, and kind of wanted to he was just obsessed with the whole idea of the Cid. He wrote a bunch of really kind of famous academic works in the early 1900s, trying to find the historical Cid and stuff. And it was a lot of these sources that were the book will go into kind of what he got right and what got wrong, and it's these sources that get abused, especially by the Francoist regime, for example. But then just to be fair too, we got on the other side, what page? I should have you think I would have remembered what page. Let's see. So we're talking about on the other side. So let's see, there was a liberal and Republican Cid in the 19th and early 20th centuries. This Cid confronted the powerful while remaining free and true to himself. Alternatively, he rendered loyalty due to the office while confronting an unworthy person filling the office. His advance was based on his own merits rather than birth, so he could embody the democratic ideal. He rose to significance in early republicanism as he was linked to the origins of the Spanish nation, an opponent of absolutism and arbitrary royal power, and a defender of liberty. And then kind of going forward a little bit more, after the Republicans lose in the Spanish Civil War, and Franco's fascist party takes over and everything. So although with Franco's victory the Catholic national vision triumphed in Spain, the left-wing interpretation of the Cid was kept alive by Republicans in exile, but now focusing on his suffering in exile and the injustice of the king who had banished him. So you kind of keep going. So it's kind of interesting just seeing all the different political parties and ideologies, even up into kind of the modern period, but kind of throughout the entire early modern period, really. Kind of, like I said, just utilizing the image of the Sith and like manipulating it towards their own ends. I don't know, I just find that stuff really interesting. You also learn about all the literature and drama and even the movies like the El Cid with Charlton, did I just say Charleston Heston? I think it is. Charlton Heston, are kind of examined, kind of what they got right, what they were doing wrong, what they might have kind of, took some liberty with and everything like that. There's a lot of like comedies and tragedies like in the Middle Ages and the early modern period that used the Cid as well. So I thought that was just really cool. I feel like this was like a huge gap in my knowledge base, and now I feel a little bit more like I actually kind of, like I've heard of the poem of the Cid, and I think I've even read of some of the like a couple excerpts or something, but never really knew too much. I guess I was thinking he was much more legendary than I a lot of the historical stuff that we do know for certain, I didn't realize was like that concrete, like we can actually like pin down and everything. So, anyways, if you like medieval history, this is a great way. You like medieval biography. Well, if you like any kind of like biographies of complex figures, I think this would be a good one. Because, like I said, he's not. Both sides always kind of misconstrue him. Just because he's not like the perfect vassal. Fighting for Christian Spain. He fought with Muslims and like defeated a bunch of like Christian armies and stuff, but he also wasn't like the super liberal kind of let's like everyone get along and everything as well. He kind of went from like town to town, basically saying, yeah, I'm gonna like sack your city unless you give me some like plunder and, and tribute and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I just, like I said, very he had his own code of honor for sure, and you kind of learn a lot about that as well. But like I said, just a very, very complex and great figure, at least from like what's come down to us and everything like that. But I had a lot of fun. I feel like I learned a ton from it, so I really enjoyed it, and I do recommend you to read this book. But if you love if you love medieval history, or you like biographies, definitely check this one out. And like I said, I want to thank Pegasus Books for sending me that copy. So let me know down in the comments below who your favorite medieval person is, and if there's any good biographies on them, because I need to rebuild my medieval section. I weeded my books. I'm still in the process of weeding my books, and my medieval section has taken a really big hit. So I'm gonna have to fill the shelves up. I got some space in my Middle Ages like section and everything like that. So let me know who your favorite medieval person is, and I'll see if we can find some books on it. And always remember, whether you're reading people in the Middle Ages or not, read victoriously.